I've always been really curious about what happens to the human body when one starts fasting. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shenanigans of Shreya podcast. At the moment, it is Ramadan, but also there are many different cultures that inculcate fasting in their lifestyle. And in a way, it could also be considered for detoxing. Some people literally fast just to detox their system. And I've never personally done a fast before, but I'm just really curious about what happens. This episode is going to contain a lot of information that I actually didn't know beforehand. I thought that fasting for so long, and especially in Ramadan where it's like continuously for a month straight, I thought that your brain would be kind of eating itself up in a way. Like I thought that it would affect the body's physiological responses negatively, mainly because it's such a prolonged period of time. But it's actually the exact opposite. So today in this episode, we are talking about why the brain is actually thriving when you fast. And by fasting, we imply that there's no food and sometimes water consumed during a specific time period. In a way, fasting does result in cleaning your neurons. So yeah, let's get into the neuroscience of fasting. So phase one, which is essentially the metabolic switch. So for the first 6 to 8 hours of your fast, your brain is essentially still living off of last night's food. It's burning a lot of glucose, but once last night's dinner runs out, your brain enters this state of mild survival stress. So around the 12th hour of this fast, the liver will flip a switch and it starts turning body fat into ketones. You might have heard of ketones before in like a diet or fasting context. Ketones are basically like this incredibly premium fuel for your neurons. So usually our food is transformed into glucose, which is the main metabolite in our body, but glucose can be quite messy because it leaves behind a lot of oxidative stress, whereas ketones are clean for our body. They actually trigger something called mitochondrial biogenesis, which essentially means that when your brain realizes that there's no food coming, it decides to build more efficient energy systems in your cells to keep you sharp enough to find food, essentially. So a lot of the times people might tend to feel more clarity towards the afternoon because that's when your brain has started to like switch to its mitochondrial biogenesis. It started to switch into more backup generator energy, into a more ketone state of being. Now, phase two of a fast is autophagy. So while you're busy not eating, your brain is actually cleaning. So this is a process called autophagy, and it literally translates to self-eating. This is nothing to be concerned about, actually. So your brain isn't eating memories. It's just recycling its cells within itself. In normal circumstances, when you're eating as normal, your cells are so busy processing new nutrients that they don't really have time to take out the trash, essentially. And during any fast, the digestive system is resting and the brain literally sends in, like, you can think of like a crew of cleaners, and autophagy identifies proteins that don't need to be in the brain anymore if they're misfolded and, damaged components that should have been taken out ages ago. The stuff that leads to brain fog and even neurodegenerative issues, the brain essentially just starts breaking them down and recycling them, getting rid of them. So fasting is essentially a deep clean for the gray matter of your brain. Now, phase three, the BDNF. Now, this is really interesting that fasting triggers a massive spike in a substance called BDNF. The full form is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So if you think of your brain like a garden, BDNF is essentially a fertilizer for that garden. So scientists have found that the stress of fasting, because obviously when you're fasting, your body is going to go through some sort of internal stress. Those stress signals start to grow in the brain. Now, it's the same logic in a way of, when you're lifting weights or like going to the gym, you are applying controlled stress onto your body, which will help you make your muscles stronger. So similarly, when you start applying controlled stress on your brain from fasting, BDNF supports your neurons and actually helps to grow new ones in the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the area that's responsible for learning and memory. So fasting might actually be a pretty good study hack if you want to improve your cognitive functions. Your neuroplasticity is essentially at an all-time high whenever you're fasting, and your brain is just more flexible and ready to absorb more information. Now, what's really interesting is, at the end of the day or the next day, whenever someone decides to break a fast, your ventral striatum, which is the reward center in the brain, basically explodes with dopamine. But also, the cool part about this is that because you have delayed that gratification all day, you've literally been exercising your prefrontal cortex the entire day. So every time you've wanted to eat, every time you've wanted to snack, and you've said no, you're strengthening your willpower muscle. So by the end of that fasting period, you've effectively rewired your brain to have better self-control, better focus, and a cleaner cellular system. So whether you are fasting for Ramadan or just curious about the science, remember that hunger isn't essentially a sign of weakness, it's a sign of your brain leveling up. Now, you don't have to necessarily be observing Ramadan specifically, but if you are curious about how fasting can help support your brain, hold on for a second, because you don't just jump into a marathon without training, so you really shouldn't jump into a long-term fast without a plan. So here's how to do it in a controlled, healthy manner if you're curious to try it out for yourself or just if you want to know. So number one, which is the intro phase, which is the first 12 to 14 hours. Usually it's not recommended to go for like more than 20 hours on the first day of a fast. You should start with 12-hour window. So if you finish dinner at 8 p.m., don't eat until 8 a.m. the next morning. Like try to have a 12-hour gap because this is enough time to let your insulin levels drop and give your digestive system a break without triggering a massive stress response. Now, if you aren't doing like a religious dry fast, you can keep that water flowing. It's important to have hydration because your brain is 75% water. So even a 2% drop in hydration can lead to cognitive decline, which can cancel out the BDNF benefits that we've talked about earlier. So do keep hydration up during a fast. Number three, electrolytes. When you fast, your body is basically flushing out and cleansing all the salt, all the magnesium, and you might get a headache because of that. And it's usually not because of hunger, it's because of electrolyte imbalance. So just adding a pinch of sea salt in your water can be a game changer to keep your neurons healthy. Now, if you do feel shaky or dizzy or just genuinely unwell, it is so important to stop. You don't have to force your body to fast if it's genuinely harming you. So fasting is meant to be a hormetic stressor, which essentially is kind of the good stress that makes you stronger. It's not meant to be a toxic stressor that crashes your system. There's no medal for, suffering through a day of fasting just for the sake of fasting, even if you're going to faint, So it is important to do it because you want to, not because you're forcing yourself to. Now, it is important not to break a fast with like a massive bowl of pasta or a sugary donut because your blood sugar will spike so fast, it'll give you like a glucose hangover. It is good to break a fast with high quality fats like avocados or protein like eggs to kind of ease your system back into digestion mode. So whether you are fasting for spiritual reasons or you're just wanting to test your neural limits, the goal is essentially the same, which is about resilience. So we want to fast to prove to our brains that we are in control, not our cravings. But remember, the best brain hack is the one that respects your body's limits. So, check with a doctor if you have underlying conditions, especially with things related to blood sugar. But yeah, that is all for this week's intensive dive. To everyone observing, Ramadan Mubarak, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.